It's Edge Radio Australia, time for the Greater Wealth. It is great to see you, Derek. I don't know where you are. You're quite a distance away here, but we are ready to rock and roll with the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. Mate, I believe you're somewhere in the faraway towns of Western Australia. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm in the outback on a sheep station, so it's beautiful out here. It's been raining and pastures are very, very green. Looks beautiful.
How Aussie is that? Great for our international viewers and listeners. So great, mate. Look, we're going to get into it today about crypto because, my word, I popped on the title Colossal Crypto because I tell you right now, it's all been going on in the last few days. Lots of legislation, lots of changes. Do you want to, open up the gate and let that cattle out?
Well, absolutely. I mean, on the 11th of July, crypto hit Bitcoin, I should say, hit a new high, and not surprising, it hit 117,048 US dollars. That's around 180,000 today, as of today, Australian. It's a big move up. Yeah, it's gone up, and I think a lot of that is because there's so much change that is occurring in the United States in terms of legislation in that space, as well as, which I'll get into in a minute, but as well as big money pouring into the industry now. So crypto is no longer a fringe type of thing. All the big players are lining up, and it's go, go, go. They don't want to miss out on this crypto space. You've got, you've got situations where nations are wanting to use this as a part of their sovereign funds as well, particularly Bitcoin. And so when nations are pouring billions of dollars into it and recognizing it, then of course, big industry has followed suit. And, a lot of those industry funds are now making it part of their portfolios, as well as the launch of a lot of exchange traded funds, or ETFs, as we know them in the industry. A lot of those are set up for approval, but we had some in 2024 pass, mainly on the Bitcoin and Ethereum side of things. But as that money moves through, there are more ETFs lining up. I think there are, at last count, about 17 new ones waiting for SEC approval. Meantime, other nations are putting those forward and approving them, as in Brazil, as in Canada. There's a lot of money moving into that space. Obviously, this is not financial advice, jump in and all this sort of stuff. A lot of people make a mistake of when it's going up, they get into FOMO and fear of missing out. I am hearing some reports that things may change in August. So I've taken a little bit of profit off the table and sitting in cash on one of my positions, and that's not financial advice at all, but it's how to play those markets is really fun.
Well, look, you're quite welcome to share what you're doing in your life with the rest of the world, right? What people do with that information is completely up to them. And look, a lot of people are finding this is everyone gets excited. It's a bull market, things are going up, but with the legislation, with the how entrenched in the legitimate financial markets that crypto has become, and certainly with Bitcoin, Ethereum, things like that. Now, look, it's, the old toothpaste is out of the tube. This is not going to stop. This is definitely something that if you're investing, in my opinion anyway, this is something as an investor myself that I'm looking at and wanting to get more and more involved with.
Well, certainly the technology precedes what they can do legislatively, and we're seeing now legislation starting to crawl in. And, the crypto industry has been for years saying to Congress and the House of Representatives and the US government saying, can you give us some guidelines as to what we can and can't do, please? And instead, they've been hit with lawsuit after lawsuit, particularly particular firms and exchanges from the SEC over there. And one of the campaign promises that the Trump administration made, or Trump himself said at Bitcoin 2024, was on day one, I will get rid of Gary Gensler, who was then the chairman of the SEC. Notably, Gary set his resignation date on Inauguration Day in January of 2025. And who's on the next of the firing line? Well, Trump has indicated that. Before I get to that, though, what's happening in terms of the House of Representatives in the US is set to vote on a market structure bill this week, the stablecoin bill called the Genius Act. It's already passed the Senate. And this is a big piece of legislation recognizing that stablecoins, there's three types of cryptos in the game. There's one that have utility function. There's Bitcoin. All right, let's put Bitcoin aside. Then with all the alternative coins, we have to recognize there are real world function utility type coins. And within that, you have stable coins, which kind of pair what a a dollar for dollar match might be. So if you have a coin that matches what the US dollar is doing, like USDT, that's what's going on in that phase, or it can represent some other kind of fiat currency, or even assets like gold or silver. So it's kind of like how an index fund would work, so to speak. And then you've got meme coins, which are particularly just people buy things on a whim. It's more of a collectible as opposed to have any value or real world value. But the Genius Act is focused on stablecoin acts. And so that's a very big piece of legislation in embracing this own industry. There's also a bill banning a US central bank digital currency happening as well. Trump made that a part of his election promises. Under my presidency, there'll be no CBDC. What's interesting, the story has come out that the Australian government is experimenting in CBDCs for this nation. So keep your eyes posted there.
It's a concern. I mean, I'm completely against it, obviously, and just the control. We saw what's happened. It's been mentioned so many times, but it needs to be re-mentioned. The fact of, look, people are having their bank accounts frozen. We all know what happened to the truckers in Canada during COVID. With a completely digital currency, the control is certainly taken away from you and certainly handed to the governments and the institutions. And to me, that's not something that should happen.
Not at all. And it's interesting how people are looking for alternatives within that space as well, so that they can have more sovereignty in their finances and have more ability to make those choices, as we always have. I mean, I was reminiscing this week, we always do. The yesteryear always seems more glamorous than it is now. But I mean, how good things were in the 70s. I was thinking about that. You had none of this kind of encroaching internet. You'd go away on holidays. You wouldn't see people for 4 weeks and all this sort of stuff. Maybe I'm being a little too sentimental. But these are really strange times moving forward, where we have to make these kind of considerations in terms of what's an issue for my privacy, what's an issue in terms of my sovereignty as an individual. And I'm doing a lot of presentations. That's why I'm out in the bush at the moment, doing a presentation on this sort of stuff on Albany tomorrow night. From 7:30 at the good old Dog Rock Hotel. What I picked an icon out here in Albany, and that's what we're trying to do, is just present to people, hey, this is what's going on, and you can actually take advantage of this because there are opportunities in this space. Prepare to prosper.
Now, good on you for that, quite frankly. I mean, look, Blue Sky Factory, I'm a big fan. Obviously, I've done one of your courses. The people I know who have done your courses are all doing ridiculously well, which is fantastic to watch and be part of. But I want to actually congratulate you on this front. You're taking it to the people. You're out there in the bush. You've got the show in Albany. Like, so much when it comes to, we've certainly seen with government here in Western Australia, this desire to diminish the voice of the bush. And let's be honest, okay, without farmers, we've got no food, we've got no this, we've got no that. The farmers are the backbone of this country to such a big degree. And for that reason, good on you for getting out there and remembering that farmers count and they vote.
It's funny, I've got a soft spot for our farmers, and you're exactly right. They put food on our table. I mean, what they've had in terms of the export range on our sheep industry, it's just been absolutely ridiculous. They've had to put up with ridiculous proposals by government in terms of the Cultural Heritage Act, which, thanks to you guys at Edge Radio, went and fought for the farmers in 2024 of May, and just went out there and showed the ridiculousness of what was on the table proposed there. Now, there are people saying that, well, they've gotten through that by other means. But it's put it on the radar that we've got to keep bureaucrats in check, and I think that's really, really important. A good government is when they fear the people, as opposed to when people fear the politicians. And I think it's just gone too far, and I think it's starting to be reeled in. People are slowly waking up, and that's really, really exciting to see.
On that front, there's been a lot of people who are coming forward and talking about their accounts being blocked and frozen, rather, and the fact that they're losing their ability to spend their own money, or they're being told what they can spend their own money on, which is just I don't know, it's beyond fathomable, quite frankly. So for yourself, mate, who's in this industry, who's someone who is actually there educating people on how to build wealth, are you finding that people knowing that, people experiencing that, people knowing people who are going through it, is that bringing more people to your classes, I guess, to gain more knowledge?
Well, there's certainly more people waking up to it now and starting to think differently than there were probably a couple of years ago. And a lot of it was fear and doom and gloom for those who were awake, as we put them. I mean, I think there's three categories: there's those who are awake, those who are waking up, and those who are asleep and don't want to know, want to just keep their head buried in the sand.
Sure.
And it's that latter category that's the hardest to reach, and I feel sorry for as well in some ways because just it's not a solution; it's just
No,
denial.
no.
Um, but the category in the middle there, those people starting to wake up, certainly noticing is increasing. They're moving from that sleep category into the waking up, and that's good. And I think you can't keep secrets have a way of coming out. They really do, and particularly in this day and age of the internet, more and more is coming out. We're seeing that on big scale, what's hitting the news and what's not hitting the news. But people are talking, and that's really, really exciting. And we got to keep talking. We've got to keep having these discussions. But what's going on in the United States when you've got things like the Genius Act going through, you just can't keep that silent. And what it's forcing is foreign governments to take notice, because if you want to engage in the United States, you're going to have to play ball with them because they are the biggest economy in the world. They've also got legislation suggesting industry will notch up this major win. Maybe that stablecoin legislation will get through before August. There are some predictions on that,
Right.
and they've been seeking that clarity since February. So things certainly have momentum and are changing at a rapid pace on so many fronts.
With the Republicans having actual power in both houses, is this meaning those things are being accelerated through?
Absolutely. And I think Trump is trying to take advantage of this before the midterm elections come along, while they still have that power to push, and get it done. He's got to go for broke here because he's got nothing to lose in terms of trying to get re-election, supposedly or theoretically. And America has to move quickly. Its interest on its debt exceeds its defense spending alone. And you cannot sustain that. Hence why they've been having Doge go through and make so many cuts and find all this incredible waste that taxpayers money in the United States is being used for. And not only that, but funding projects around the world that really were no benefit to them, and cutting that. So obviously when somebody has a budget and their income drops, that's one of the first things you do is, what can I cut? And second of all, you look at how can I make more? And Trump has certainly been pulling that lever as well, particularly with his trip to the Middle East recently. Around $6 trillion of investment going into the US, and the tariffs that have been going on are certainly pulling in more income for the United States as well. If we have a look at the tariffs for the US, it's starting to get clarity as to which nations are going to be taxed at what rate as of the 1st of August. We've got the European Union on 30%, which is massive. The EU, of course, have always considered themselves allies of the United States, and they got a bit of a wake-up call at the address in Germany with Vance going over there saying, you guys, we don't share in common this freedom of speech anymore. What's going on? And then you've got, of course, another interesting play here. We've had South Africa, and we saw, of course, the discussions with the president of South Africa in the Oval Office with President Trump at that time, revealing, of course, the situation that's happening in South Africa with allegations about white farmers having their land, they're being killed for their land, basically. Well, as part of the BRICS nations, they've been slapped with 30% tariff. That's what they've incurred, will have moving forward. Interesting, there's no real decision on what's happening for Australia. But talk about allies, Canada's been hit with 35%, so even higher on that scale. So there's a lot that's been coming in question.
People aren't aware. I mean, okay, when you looked at the tariffs on milk products, on cheese and so forth between the US and Canada, it was it was horrendously to Canada's benefit. No question about it. In fact, I don't see how it wasn't massively damaging the dairy farming industry in the US. So, you look at these big numbers, 35%, but these have already been in place. Like on the other side, they've been anti-competition in so many different ways, and certainly when we talk about Canada and the EU, this has been the prevalent thing, mate. In my eyes, going in there with open eyes and thinking, okay, hang on, I'm going to look more from the American point of view. Boy, has been poisoned against them for a very long time. Seeing these tariffs and the numbers that we're talking about, to my mind, a lot of it's just equalizing.
Well, people forget it's not just about trade too. It's the United States benefits of being allies with them that these nations have
Right.
taken advantage of. And Canada certainly relies on the United States for defense. I mean, you've got to remember how close Canada and Russia are, just a few miles. It's not
You
much
don't
at
think of
all.
that. You just don't think
And
about that, do you?
no, and of course, it's a really interesting situation, not just across the border. Of course, you've got Alaska there, which is only a few miles from the Russian border, but you've got to think of the northern tip, and hence all the discussions been going on about Greenland leading up to this. Strategically, Trump wanted that and access to rare minerals as part of the deal, offering them defense and in exchange for rare access to rare minerals, or rare earths, I
Yep.
should say. And so, you're seeing this whole shakeup of, hey, more nations, you need to take more responsibility. There's been encouragement for the Australian government to up their spend on defence as well. And yeah, is Australia going to do that? Well,
What do we need defence for? What do we need defence? I mean, and there's Chinese vessels going left, right, and centre up and down our coasts,
yeah.
and our head of our state, I mean, Anthony Albanese, is just too busy doing his Kentucky tour up there in China.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Australia's relationship with China. And I saw a video meme recently, and it was showing how many farms have been sold off to China. And staggering, if you look at an Australian map, and in red were the Chinese farms, how many are being sold to the CCP. I think a lot of Australians need to wake up. Now, there is the argument, look, they can't take that land with them back to China, so what's there to be lost? But when you've got, and here I am in the agricultural sector, funny enough, when you've got your beef being raised here, your water being taken overseas, and that back to, of course, China, a lot of Australians are saying, hey, how come we're not getting the best of the fruit of our land? Why is it being shipped off?
Well, it's true. I mean, we look off our shores, our seafood, our absolutely prime seafood is all going overseas, and we get the leftovers. I mean, it is not good enough. It really isn't. And as for the Chinese ownership, again, I want to always make this very clear. It feels like a disclaimer, but it's just how I feel. It's important to realize we're not talking about Chinese people. We're talking about the Chinese government, and the ideology of the Chinese government is obviously as a communist country. We all know, as I say, that the Labor Party here has got a massive element of that throughout it. This is a problem. Yes, they can't pick up the land, but they can sure rape and pillage it and make sure that they take the best of it and leave us with the problems afterwards. Whether that we're talking about, look, it could be anything. It could be I want to say windmills. They're not called windmills. Those the jolly great things that have been causing nothing but environmental disasters for such a long time. They're being dumped on Chinese land here in Western Australia. But West Australians have to do the cleanup. It's just not on.
Yeah, and I think Australians are starting to wake up and go, well, what do we do here? We've got a mess. We want the benefits of being associated with the United States, and yet we've wanted the economic benefits of being associated with China. China's starting to having to diverse its sector now and deal with other nations as you expect they would, and less reliant on the United States as big consumers. Australia, well, I think it's started to move in that direction, but it certainly needs to move quicker.
Yeah. Like America, we as Australia, we need to redevelop our manufacturing sector. The fact that we've destroyed it it's horrendous. It really is. There's so much that Australia used to produce. Now we send all of our raw materials off, and then we import the stuff back in. It's just not good business. It's good short-term business for the old profits short-term, but long-term, it just destroys an entire industry.
Well, the world is changing big time, and it's changing rapidly. And those who can pivot in business and move quickly do best. And I think it highlights that not only is it changing politically, it's also changing economically. For example, right now, I'd love to show some footage of what Jerome Powell said. But before I do that, I want to just highlight this. The whole essence of money is changing. So, for instance, Texas is wanting to pass legislation that makes gold and silver legal tender in its state. So it's fully recognized that you can use that as money. You're seeing these kind of things come through. In fact, I was looking at a story this morning, and it's saying that the crypto firm Tether holds $8 billion pile of gold in a secret Swiss vault somewhere. Now, what's interesting about this whole stablecoin situation in the crypto space is that they will have to back what it is they've got. So it could be that stablecoin companies are the ones that hold the biggest area of US Treasuries in terms of US Treasury notes, whereas that's always been a banking thing. And
Yes.
so you're seeing that the pendulum shift from, of course, banks and traditional banks and centralized banks to will it now be crypto companies holding these things to be able to do what they do in terms of the legislation that's going forward. It's just incredibly different, and it's incredibly credible world to watch and witness as we move forward. And of course, I mean, can you imagine, you're paying for stuff not only with stablecoins, perhaps with treasury notes, but even stablecoins in relation to gold and silver. Those are already available now. And with Texas putting its legislation forward, they may be able to digitally pay in gold and silver. It's just extraordinary.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's happening in the crypto world right now. Gold and silver is being traded as crypto, which is tied to that actual precious metal, rather. All right, mate. Do you want to preempt this video then that we were talking about with Trump with Jerome?
Yeah, well, what we were saying before in terms of Trump's announcement in 2024 about the SEC, Gary Gensler, he got out of there before he could be fired from the old Apprentice host. And now we've got a situation where is the writing on the wall. Take a look at this video.
I think we should be, I think we should be 3 points lower interest rate. He's costing our country a lot of money. We should be number one, and we're not. And that's because of Jerome Powell. In terms of interest, we are number one in the world.
So Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve, the central bank. It sets the interest rates that Americans pay, kind of like a Reserve Bank of Australia.
Sure.
And there was an interesting insider video that went out recently. James O'Keefe Media had one of their inside journalists go on a date, as they set him up, with somebody who was an advisor within the Federal Reserve. In that interview, that individual said that Jerome Powell is not a fan of Trump, has tried to slow Trump on so many issues, and doesn't want to lower the interest rate. Well, Trump's frustrated by that because obviously it's costing Americans a lot of interest to pay this debt of trillions of dollars. And he's saying you need to lower it, to get the economy again. And Jerome is, according to Trump, not wanting to lower it. He wants to keep it there. He's like, well, what if inflation gets away? And he says, well, if inflation gets away, you up it, but you don't need to right now. So this really is an interesting sort of discussion between government versus a private entity like the Federal Reserve. Moving forward, how will that play out?
So who does Jerome Powell work for?
Well, there's a board of advisors, of course, on the Federal Reserve, but who are the private owners of it? That's what comes into question. You're exactly right.
Exactly where I'm going on that one. And the fact is that when they've got such control over world markets through US, and when you've got the leader of the free world in Trump basically having to, negotiate with these people, it just shows you the hierarchy of it all, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think, I've said it before, I've heard some prophets say the Federal Reserve will not be around for a lot longer. When I first heard that 2 years ago, I was like, whoa, that's a big call. I can't share that publicly and this sort of stuff. It's kind of like...
I remember the conversation, Derek.
Yeah. And I thought, what am I going to say? But now you can start to see how this is starting to play out. With crypto companies now being the ones of holders of these assets in terms of treasury notes and bonds and all these kind of traditional derivatives that has been a thing of the banks.
It's changed so much, and I think it's just going to change more and more as we know. But all right, so with what changes have been made to crypto legislation in the last, say, 2 weeks that have had a real genuine effect?
Well, they're still voting on it, Aaron. So it hasn't actually come into passing yet. What happens is it's passed by the Senate. It then has to be passed by the House. And then, of course, the president has to sign it in. And usually there's a bit of back and forth between the Senate and the House to stamp out some of the finer details of the legislation or proposed legislation. And then, of course, they all have to vote on it. But it's gotten through stage 1. It's being debated in stage 2. Stage 3 is when when the president either signs it into existence or he vetoes the bill. And it's highly likely he's going to just sign it and get it happening immediately. Why is this important? Because, you've got situations where the BRICS are going, we're forming our own bank. We want, and this is representing about 45% of the world's population, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they're wanting to have their own banks. They're doing deals between each other as a nation in combat or kind of undermine the US dollar. So the stablecoin legislation is incredibly important to America because it's got to stabilize its control of the world's economies.
Do you think that what's going on right now will have a massive increase in people's or people using crypto?
I certainly think it will, but I think a lot of the effects of it flow out. For those who aren't invested in crypto, what I think they may not see, or be conscious that they're actually dealing with crypto. What's happening is the banks are doing things behind the scenes. So it's more of a in the back house type reality where the technology is changing. And I had said, and in terms of my research, I understand, this is what I think, your bank account will become pretty much a crypto wallet that is held with custody by the bank. That's what the banks want to do. The banks want to stay in the play. They don't want to have people and citizens having self-custody. So that's the challenge of them. And of course, decentralized finance is really changing the whole game, where things go, where people have the opportunity to actually, if they do these correctly and are strategic about it, can end up being the bank themselves, where they can lend their crypto assets out to the marketplace and profit big time. So, I mean, this is extraordinary when you think about it, because back when the Federal Reserve was formed on Jekyll Island back in the day, if you'd been invited to that round table, would you have bought shares in a privatized bank? Well, this is kind of like there are opportunities right now where I believe that people can be that central bank and have a degree in that.
Yeah, I'm with you. We see it all the time. We've obviously got a show here about crypto, the Crypto Hour of Power, and Brandon from Orangeburg Road, he talks about, and we've had guests on that literally, they're tokenizing real estate and this sort of thing. So, I mean, there's a lot of different levels to this. So if you can do that with real estate, then why can't you effectively set up your own bank?
Well, that's right. I mean, we've talked about the level of currency and moving funds from one bank to another. That's certainly what crypto has solved and mainly been focusing on up to this point. But yes, tokenization is a whole different aspect of the game. And it shows trillions of dollars potentially being able to pour in this industry. And this is why the market is moving rapidly and quickly. They're already doing that in Dubai in terms of real estate legislation going through that you can tokenize. It's only available for the moment for UAE people and citizens and residents there. But the fact that that's happening is an indicator that, where the big money is going. And of course, Dubai is just dripping in money. The oil barons out there have got a lot to spend. And I think that's what's taking the world's notice, going, whoa, if it's going to go this direction, we need to be at this. America in this situation saying we want to be at the forefront. Nations like Australia, well, they're still experimenting.
Yeah. Where I don't know if this has always been the case, but it's starting to feel that way. Certainly watching what our government's been doing over the last couple of years, we've become real followers. We're not really setting the standard or anything. Would that be a fair thing to say about our adoption of crypto?
Absolutely. I can understand it too from one perspective. I mean, Australia's economy is only like 1.9% of the world's GDP, right? So you're not the main player by any means. And of course, if you're not the one who can make the splash in the world economy, you're more limited into what you can or can't do. In fairness, however, Derek, when you do see nations.
On the other side, we've got a government that, we are a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of the environment, but our government is quite prepared to completely bomb our economy to make our tiny percentage of climate change or weather or whatever you want to call it. We're willing to lead in that respect, but we're absolute followers when it comes to the finance, and proportionately we're at the same kind of level, right?
Well, the whole climate change thing for me is purely socialism, an excuse to get socialism into the system and remove capitalism. I think let's call a spade a spade. Yeah. And I think we've had governments that really have wanted socialistic mindsets or have come in with socialistic ideals and pushed that on the Australian people more and more. Case in point, the Firearms Act's reform of Western Australia, just incredible how they just are making it far more difficult for people to own firearms. Now, I know that's a contentious issue, but then when you see, of course, the Cultural Heritage Act, which spoken about before, and of course the voice referendum, having these unelected bodies determine how we constitutionally can behave. There's a lot of question marks that have to come into Australia and going, well, hang on a second, what's really going on here?
Look, thoroughly agree. And I'm someone who's always been anti-gun. I've never actually been pro-gun in any way, shape, or form. Right? I've had guns as far as, I've fired guns. I shouldn't say I've had guns. I've fired guns many times, never owned one in my life, all the way from being a child, air rifling at the local police boys groups and all of that kind of thing, and being, growing up on farms, guns are around. It's ultimately, these are, tools for farmers, but they're also rights for people. And in really, really simple terms, these are rights. If somebody wants to go to a target range and actually, do some practice, relax, all that kind of carry on, they have the right to own these things. And when the government steps in and first publishes everyone's address, which is just, it's just, I still cannot get over the fact, if I was a gun owner, I would have sued the West Australian government. No question, I would have actually opened that litigation up, rather. It's just frightening, because we see that they're coming for our guns, they're coming for our money, they're coming for our land. And if anybody can't wake up to the fact that this is blatant socialism, and socialism's it's the Diet Coke of communism, it's on the way to communism. If people can't see that this is the case, well, then they really need their eyes open up. This is why talking about these things is so important. This is why talking about cryptocurrency and a way of breaking away from the system is great. And obviously doing courses like, you have a Blue Sky Factory that will actually open your eyes to different ways of actually creating wealth, right?
Yeah, thank you. That's right. And it's also getting people to a point where they're not reliant on the government. I mean, I look at some people who are purely reliant on their pension coming in, and I feel sorry for them, because they're very budget conscious. They can only do so much. They don't have avenues of more money coming in, and they're limited in what they do. A lot of that is a mindset.
Sure.
And I think it frustrates me, because I feel for them. And then you hear in one perspective, they say, oh, money doesn't matter. And money is simply a tool to do goodbye. It's not the be all and end all. But however, when you're seeing them having to put back groceries because they can't afford it, or really watching their budgets, you kind of go, money is important, guys, wake up. So there's that aspect of it as well. But yeah, back to your point in terms of these kind of legislation, some of the most responsible people I've seen in society I know a few firearm owners. They're the ones that are taking responsibility for their future and their kids, and they're not relying on government. And it's in the government's interest that they do that, and that people do that, because then they're less reliant on social systems such as, the dole, as we used to call it, or unemployment benefit, or of course, all these other benefits that we have. We've got to get the socialism out of our system. We've got to start thinking more independently and going, we can do this. We can be a player on the world stage. We've proven that in our sporting prowess.
Right.
But we need to get past that in terms of that manufacturing and kind of self-determination of what future do we want, rather than going, hey, being a follower of, well, this is a trend and that's a trend. Let's go into a little more self-determination here.
Look, so true. Australia is a country, we've always, we love being the underdog. I think that's part of our psyche. And I certainly, I've always put my strength behind the underdog. Here's the problem with that, is we don't think highly of ourselves. We've got a social identity issue there, where we don't think, we don't put ourselves up there with the power to achieve these things. Let's be frank. We've got a country here which has natural resources that they're the envy of the rest of the world. Right? We have an ability, with what we have on this beautiful, beautiful country, to have an incredible lifestyle for everyone. And we want people to aspire to be higher. We want them to want to achieve more. And that's not all about money. That's about freedom. That's about having choice to do what you want to do. And as I say, if we lived in a country that was war-torn or was low on resources, or whatever the case may be, that would be different. But we live, quite frankly, in paradise, and we should be living in a way that is so much better for each and every one of us. So we should be lifting everyone up, not holding them back.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Monaco and how small that island is, right? And it's one of the world's richest areas. Okay, if anyone has an excuse for taxation, you'd think Monaco is, but what they've done is gone zero taxation. They get all the wealthy there. Here we are
Sure.
in Australia, on a big, big island, and we want to tax everything and everyone. And it's like, hang on a second, I think, in talking to people since I've been down here in the bush, one of the conversations I had with someone is they said Australians are used to being told what to do. And I think that was a really interesting observation when you put that in context of the convict nation mindset that we've kind of inherited as culturally. Yeah, absolutely. Australians have been used to being told what to do. And we've always, and it shows in the investment structure that we have, a lot of Australians have made money on property. Property has been the one thing that is one of the big tools they've used. And, you go back when somebody had their own freedom, well, they could then own land. So you can see that psychological playbook go through the generations here. It's time for us to think beyond that. How can we create wealth outside of land, outside of property, outside of those things? Nothing against property if that's your thing, but we've got to be more open to other investment structures. And of course, one of those is business. And we have done quite well in some business fronts. Very, very well. We need more of that.
About it. Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, as I say, we're our own worst enemy here in Australia. We do hold ourselves back, and that's something that we've really got to psychologically get over, right? Look, knowledge is power. This is why we talk about these things. This is why we talk about, the different financial structures. This is why we talk about the politics and the clash between politics and the financial world. This is why we're talking about crypto, in today's show, because these are all alternative ways that you can lift yourself up.
Right. And yeah, it's creativity, and like it or not, the world is changing very rapidly. The amount of investment that's going into artificial intelligence is massive, particularly from the Middle East. They've seen, hey, we've been profiting on oil all these decades, but we've got to start diversifying. And they are. And they're not only doing it in their own backyard, they're doing deals with the United States and saying, hey, here's several $1 trillion. We want to be a part of what is going to go in the next frontier. And, Australia needs to have those kind of mindsets moving forward.
All right, mate, we're going to wrap up. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone?
I think we need to recognize the world is not the same. It is quickly changing and rapidly. We're in a time of acceleration, and those who can pivot and pivot quickly will do well. And I think, if you fight the change, you're not in a good space to do that. It'd be nice to reminisce like I did earlier and fight it and go back, but you can't. It is what it is. And so those who can innovate and be a leader in that, not just say, oh, this is bad, this is all doom and gloom. No, there's such opportunities that if you're one who is positioned in a position of power in that space, in that industry, and authority in that space, that changes a playbook big time. I mean, the fact that you can go and order a taxi or a car using an app on your phone is extraordinary. Who would have thought of that when the internet was just created? And so we need to think bigger than we have.
I absolutely love that, mate. One thing that I will say about you, which I think is one of your strongest attributes, is the fact that you can find opportunity everywhere and a positive spin on things. No, but it's great. I mean, if you think about things positively and you kick back, you might have adversity come your way. Take a couple of minutes, have a look at it, step back, and guess what? It's just opportunity, just dressed up a little bit differently. You've just got to find it.
Absolutely. And the more resilient guys you come across, when bad things happen, you go, you know what? All I'm doing is strengthening my resilience muscle. Let's move forward. Yeah. I think that's the opportunity that you've got to look at.
Well, if resilience was a muscle, I would look like Schwarzenegger, but never mind. It's time to end the show. Thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate that. And look, I think very highly of the work that you're doing down there. And I think that the people down in Albany, if they come along today, look, they're going to get just such great knowledge come their way. So thank you very much for that. This has been The Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio.